More stories from Grandma's Attic by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Dora. Chapter 15. The Haircut. One of the things I liked to do best when I was a little girl was to brush Grandma's hair. Sometimes, just before bedtime when she took her hair down for the night, I had the chance to do that. The big bone hairpins were carefully placed in a little china dish on her dresser, and all her beautiful long hair would fall down her back. "I never saw such long hair, Grandma," I said one evening. "Haven't you ever had it cut?" Grandma handed me the brush and picked up her sewing. "You could almost say that," she laughed. "It was never all cut off short, but some of it did get cut once." "Tell me about it," I begged. "How did it happen? Did you get in trouble for it?" "I was in trouble, all right," Grandma replied, "but not so much for the haircut as for what I did to cover it up." Grandma thought for a moment, then began her story. It was a dark, rainy day. Sarah Jane and I were playing in the upstairs room until the rain stopped and we could go outside. Sarah Jane had come over early that morning to show me a birthday gift she had received the day before. I was suitably impressed because I had never had anything that nice. It was a beautiful, heart-shaped locket. "What are you going to put in it?" I asked. "You'll have to have something special for that pretty locket." Sarah Jane nodded. "I know. I'd like to have a nice picture." She looked at me thoughtfully. "You're my best friend. Do you have a picture I could put in here?" I shook my head. "I'm afraid not. All the pictures of me are in the big album downstairs. If one was missing, Ma would notice right away." Sarah Jane sighed. "It's a shame not to have something to put in it." Then she brightened. "My cousin has a piece of hair in her locket. You have lots of curls. Maybe I could have one to put in mine." I was pleased that Sarah Jane wanted to put something that belonged to me in her locket, but I wasn't really sure about the hair. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think Ma would like it. I've never had my hair cut." "She wouldn't even see it," Sarah Jane insisted. "I'll cut it from underneath." "Well, be careful. I don't want to get into trouble." I ran to get the scissors, then sat down on the footstool, and Sarah Jane went to work. She lifted up the top curls and chose one underneath the cut. "This is a good one. All the others cover this spot. I'll only cut a little bit off the end, and you can see how it looks. Maybe you'd like some cut off every curl." "Oh, I don't think so," I said quickly. "One will be enough. I'll be in trouble if Ma sees that much gone." "Don't worry," Sarah Jane said. "I'm not going to hurt it." She picked up the scissors and began to snip the end off the curl. Just at that moment, a door slammed downstairs, and both of us jumped. The scissors closed on my hair, and 3 curls dropped to the floor. "Oh, look what you did! How am I ever going to cover up all those curls?" "I couldn't help it," Sarah Jane said. "You shouldn't have jumped." "Well, you jumped too. How did I know you had half my hair in your hand? You said just 1 curl." "The rest of them fell down in the way when you moved," she said. "I couldn't help it." I ran to the mirror and looked at my hair. "Oh," I moaned. "Wait until Ma sees that. I'm really going to get it this time." Sarah Jane looked remorseful. "Maybe you could comb it some other way so it won't be noticed?" "Ma always combs my hair. There's no way to keep her from seeing it." "You could put your sunbonnet on," Sarah Jane suggested. "That would cover it up." "I guess I could," I said doubtfully. "Maybe I can think of some way to tell her before she sees it." I ran to get my sunbonnet and tucked my hair up underneath it. No one would see what had happened until I had to take it off. "Won't your Ma wonder why you're wearing a sunbonnet when it's raining?" Sarah Jane asked when I returned. "You're the one who suggested it," I said crossly. "And you're the one who cut my hair off. Now you can just pray that the sun comes out." Whether she did or not, I don't know, but very shortly the rain stopped and the sun came out. We hurried as far away from the house as possible for the rest of the morning. When dinner time approached, I had to think of some way to stay away from Ma. "Sarah Jane, why don't you run up to the house and ask Ma if we can have some sandwiches for a picnic?" "Oh, I can't," Sarah Jane said. "I promised Ma I'd be home by dinner time. I'll have to hurry now or I'll be late. I'll try to come back this afternoon." I sat on a rock and watched Sarah Jane run across the field. There was no need for her to rush back, I thought glumly. There probably wouldn't be anything left of me to visit. I sat there as long as I dared. I knew Ma would send one of the boys to find me if I didn't come when the dinner bell rang the second time. So I trudged slowly toward the house, hoping against hope that Ma would be too busy to notice me. I arrived at the door just as everyone sat down at the table. Ma glanced at me and said, "I thought you'd gone home with Sarah Jane. Hurry and wash. We're ready to eat now." I dawdled with the washing as long as possible, then slipped into my chair. Pa asked the blessing, and Ma began to dish up the food. "Haven't you forgotten something, Mabel?" Pa asked.
"No, I don't think so, Pa." "You've still got your bonnet on, silly,"
said Roy.
"Oh, that,"
I said quickly.
"I thought I'd save time by not having to put it on again."
I bent my head over my plate and began to eat quickly. Since no one said anything, I ventured to look up. Everyone was looking at me in a strange way. Roy continued to stuff food into his mouth while keeping his eye on me, but the others had stopped eating. I put my head down again.
"Mabel,"
said Ma,
"is there something you ought to tell us?" "Oh, no, Ma. It's just that Sarah Jane will be back after dinner, and we're doing something special down by the brook."
That would not have been the end of the matter, I am sure, except that at just that moment our neighbor, Mr. Hobbs, drove into the yard. Pa went out to meet him, and Ma hurried to set another place at the table. With a sigh of relief, I continued my dinner. Mr. Hobbs came in and sat down, and after a few words with Pa about the crops, he said,
"Well, Jim, do you have a young lady visiting you today?"
"This is just me, Mr. Hobbs," I said.
"Oh, so it is,"
Mr. Hobbs exclaimed.
"Why, with that fancy bonnet, I was sure it must be a fine lady from town."
Ma returned to the table with more food, and she looked at me with disgust.
"Mabel, go take off that sunbonnet. You look ridiculous." "I'm through eating now, Ma," I said. "Couldn't I please go outside?"
If Mr. Hobbs had not been there, Ma would have insisted that I obey her. But since he was, and I had finished my dinner, she allowed me to leave. Thankfully, I ran back to the brook to wait for Sarah Jane. Finally, she arrived, breathless, and dropped into the grass.
"What did your Ma say?"
she asked.
"She doesn't know yet. I didn't take off my bonnet. I was just lucky Mr. Hobbs came."
And I told Sarah Jane what had happened. She sat up and looked at me with amazement.
"Now you'll be in for it. I've found out that no matter how bad you've been, you end up being twice as bad if you hide it from your folks. My ma always says, 'Be sure your sin will find you out.' And it always does."
"Well, you're not much comfort," I retorted. "It's easy for you to say that since it isn't your hair that's cut off."
"Take off your bonnet and let's see it again,"
Sarah Jane said.
"Maybe it doesn't look as bad as we thought it did."
I pulled off my sunbonnet, and Sarah Jane gazed at my tangled curls.
"It looks as bad as we thought it did,"
she said dismally.
"I don't know how you're going to cover it up."
"It's a sure thing I can't go around wearing my sunbonnet until it grows out. I won't get away with that again. You'll have to think of something else."
"I will,"
Sarah Jane cried.
"It's your hair."
Then she stopped.
"I guess you're right. It was my fault for wanting to put a curl in my locket. The only thing to do is to tell your ma what happened and let her punish me too."
She sighed.
"When do you want to do it?" "I won't have any fun sitting here thinking about it all afternoon,"
I replied glumly.
"We might as well go now."
Slowly I replaced my bonnet, and Sarah Jane and I started for the house.
"What do you think she'll do?"
Sarah Jane asked.
"Will she spank us?"
I considered that for a moment.
"No, I don't think so. Ma doesn't spank me very often, and she wouldn't ever spank you. It will be something worse than that. We probably won't be able to play together for a long time."
Ma was sitting on the porch shelling peas for supper. As we approached, she looked up and smiled. "Did you girls have a nice time at the brook?" she asked. "I thought you'd be back up to the house before you went home, Sarah Jane. You forgot something." Ma pulled Sarah Jane's locket and my curls from her apron pocket. We gazed at them in silence. This was not at all what we had expected.
I hope you've learned something today, girls, Ma said. The hurting of your own uneasy conscience is worse than any punishment anyone else can give you.
She looked at my sunbonnet.
Covering something up doesn't make it go away. You knew I would see what happened sooner or later, didn't you, Mabel?
I nodded miserably.
Well, come on, Ma said kindly. Let's wash your hair and see if we can part it on the other side until that place grows out. I think you've suffered enough. We won't have to let Pa and the boys know what happened.
And that's what we did, Grandma said. Sarah Jane and I never forgot that lesson. Fortunately, hair grows back again. Everything isn't that easily repaired, however.
And did Sarah Jane get the curl for her locket?
I asked. Oh, yes, Grandma laughed. Ma let her keep it, but she really didn't need it to remember me or that day. End of chapter 15.